Today we'll be talking about Prop B, which would reinstate a ban on homeless camping in Austin. And we are joined by Prop B supporters Matt Makoviak and Cleo
Patricia.
Yeah, and thank you. They are co-founders of Save Austin Now, which collected the signatures to place Prop B on the ballot. We're also joined by Julie Oliver, who is part of the No on Prop B coalition, and Matt Malika, the executive director of ECHO, Ending Community Homelessness Coalition. Um, so we'll start with proponents of Prop B. Question for you, and we're going to get to a lot of questions hopefully here. I'll ask a few, and then we'll open it up to other members of the board. But there's no doubt that homelessness in Austin has become more visible since the city council lifted the camping ban. In your view, how would passing Prop B and reinstating the camping ban help address homelessness?
So there's no disagreement that we have a homeless epidemic. This ballot is asking all voters if they feel that the current approach taken by the city is acceptable. I believe that the majority of Austinites believe both that it is not acceptable and that Austin should be focused on rapid deployment of resources to give people safe places to go. There are people who have no intention of complying and living in a housing situation that requires a significant level of responsibility. And there are those that are trying to get out of a bad situation to a place where they can be responsible and move on with their lives. We have to deal with both in appropriate ways. And these disruptive tent communities are not the answer in either case. The opposition is happy with the way things are. They have no concern for families and communities impacted. They turn to fear-mongering about forcing people back into the woods, which is nonsense. The city has the ability to designate locations for camping that aren't in the woods, just like the state has done. Could it be that the city doesn't want to give up any of Austin's expensive real estate for safe campgrounds that homeless providers will finally be able to locate homeless and provide services to them? The mayor has made a decision that it is better to let citizens, predominantly citizens of color in working class, low-income neighborhoods, let them suffer, take the chaos, loss of amenities. But whatever you do, don't give up any of the fancy real estate to give homeless an option other than going into the woods. This is weak leadership.
Quick follow-up. What do you think will become of the people who are currently camping?
Right.
Either under bridges or along Town Lake, other places. What will become of them if a camping ban is enforced?
So a lot of what the opposition will say and has done this past, years is say that this proposition is going to take us backwards. Okay, this is false. And drive around Austin, does it look like what happened in June 2019 took us forward? I don't think so. The opposition is going to tell us that advocating for housing, they've been advocating for housing for years. Yet in 2019, what they gave us had nothing to do with housing. Now, they would like to continue this failed policy with no end in sight. There is no timeline associated with the solution that they've given us. And that's because there is an incredible plan. Proposition B does not take away the right to camp. It forces the city to find safe locations for them to camp, and that is going forward. Matt, do you have anything?
Yeah, I appreciate everything Cleo said. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'll be on video here in a minute. We're just pulling to the gate. Yeah, I think from our standpoint, Cleo made a lot of great points. I think the choice that we're putting before the voters is, do you like the system better the way it is now, or do you like it better the way it was July 1st, 2019, when the camping ordinance took effect? Look, it is not simply a question of visibility. That is a framing that the left is perpetrating. It's a question of, number one, are the homeless better off today than they were a year and a half ago? And in spite of the employment status, financial motivation, and good intentions of people like Matt Malika of ECHO, We do not believe the homeless are better off today, living under the 7th Street Bridge, living on the median on Riverside Drive, living along the edge of Town Lake in unsafe situations where they're getting almost no help. So from our standpoint, we believe that the camping ordinance has made the city far less safe, that it's affected public health, it's affected the image of our city, the welcoming nature that we have towards people who are moving here and towards tourists. And now we have a problem that has grown. Matt likes to pretend that the homeless population hasn't meaningfully grown in the last year and a half. That's ridiculous. We know the unhoused homeless population grew 46%, according to ECHO's own study conducted in January of 2020. That was only with 6 months of the camping ordinance in effect. Now, it's true that we do not have empirical data that shows an exact number of estimated homeless individuals in Austin. I think there are actual reasons for that. I think that folks on the left that oppose what we're trying to do don't want an actual count. But in spite of that, your own eyes can tell you that the homeless population in Austin has grown rapidly. I estimate, based on law enforcement sources I've talked to, based on the number of encampments in our city, based on the increasing fires that we've seen, including the Buford Tower fire, which was an absolute tragedy this last week, that we have gone from around 2,500 homeless people to what I would estimate at 5,000 homeless people just over the last year and a half. And on that trajectory, we would be at 10,000 homeless people 2 years from now. So to the question you asked about where do they go, number one, they go to homeless shelters. Homeless shelters have had reduced capacity because of COVID. The expectation is that will and should change very soon as we get ahead of COVID. And certainly the homeless population can be vaccinated fairly quickly, and that would make a lot of sense. Second, they can go to transitional housing. We have transitional housing that has been ramping up. It's not been ramping up fast enough, despite the ridiculous level of increased investment that the city has put towards homelessness, going from $30 million in fiscal year 2018 to $60 million in fiscal year 2019 to $71 million in fiscal year 2020, which I believe is now $73 million this year. Those motels and hotels are being purchased. I think we now have 4 of them. We need to get those open. A lot focused on COVID, but focused on resettling our homeless community so they can get the help that they need. Third, we know the state campground exists. We know it is near capacity. We also know it's been a tremendous success. That model needs to be replicated. The city needs to stop focusing on hotels and motels and instead focus on solutions that actually work, like a campground similar to the Haven for Hope facility in San Antonio, 70 miles to our south, which is a successful model we can replicate rather than the failed models we've seen in places like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, and Honolulu. Fourth, nonprofits and philanthropic organizations like the Salvation Army, like Caritas, like Mobile Loaves and Fishes with Community First Village, and soon like the Austin Chamber will have additional facilities for homeless people to go to. So this idea that there's nowhere for them to go is simply not true and not fair. And again, the question is not, does our proposition solve the intractable problem of homelessness? The question is, do you prefer the system better? Do you believe the system is better today? Or do you want to go back to where we were a year and a half ago when there was no crisis?
Okay, question for Ms. Oliver. Many Austinites don't want to see people arrested for being homeless, but they also don't want to see homeless encampments in parks or close to roadways, dangerously close to roadways in some cases, and they worry about the fires like the ones we saw last week. What would be your argument to people who are concerned about encampments now? Why shouldn't they support Prop B?
Well, I'm going to, can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. No matter which part of Austin we live in, I live in central East Austin myself, we all want to help our unhoused neighbors. We all feel that tinge of disappointment and anger that our fellow Texans are experiencing hard times, and we all wish that there was more we could do. But right now, a very greedy few and the highly paid Republican political consultants want to make this about scoring political points. They want to divide all of us so that we're all pointing the finger at each other instead of uniting to make sure that we focus on the root causes that are driving homelessness here in Austin and across Texas, quite frankly. It's time for us to unite and recognize that Prop B is inhumane, it's illegal, it's illogical, and it will increase all of our property taxes. The ordinance is inhumane on its face. It criminalizes just being poor and being unable to afford housing. It criminalizes unavoidable behavior, sleeping. Look, many of us just concluded a Holy Week. And for those of us in the Christian faith, our treatment of those who are hungry, homeless, poor, diseased, and imprisoned can't biblically be divorced from the Christian walk. And in scriptures, Jesus himself equates our treatment of those who are destitute or distressed with our treatment of him. And you don't have to be a person of faith to see this. As my good friend John Reiser says, this town must stand for nobler impulses than making things worse for our less fortunate neighbors. And that's exactly what Prop B does. It's illogical. It will keep folks homeless longer and create additional barriers to housing and employment. Unpaid tickets lead to arrest warrants. And let me just share some statistics with you. Between 2014 and 2016, 18,000 tickets were issued, of which 90% turned into arrest warrants. I could also mention that this is a terrible distraction for law enforcement and not the best use of their time. This is roughly 1,000 hours a year of law enforcement writing tickets alone, not to mention the additional resources that go into issuing the warrants and dealing with those. It's illegal. The part of the ordinance dealing with panhandling and solicitation is an unconstitutional infringement on free speech and criminalizing homelessness when there is an inadequate supply of affordable housing, and Austin has an inadequate supply of affordable housing, that's been found to violate the 8th Amendment as cruel and unusual punishment by jailing folks who, again, are poor. Again, terrible use of our city's legal resources because we are going to be defending this in court for years and years. It's unconstitutional. And let me tell you, it will increase our property taxes. In cities that have adopted a housing-first approach, costs associated with housing the homeless, including wraparound services, are roughly half of the cost of criminalizing homelessness. Reverting to an era where homelessness was criminalized will cost us more and directly increase our property taxes to pay for crisis services. So vote no on Prop B, and let's ensure that we're instituting housing-first policies that will actually solve the problem. Not policies that take us backwards and are being pushed only to enrich a very wealthy few political consultants who are behind this.
Can I respond?
Well, we'll get to that later if you don't mind.
Okay.
The proponents had.
No, we do mind. No, we do mind.
No,
She doesn't get to attack us. She doesn't get to attack us without a response.
We get to that later.
So we can look at. No, we're not going to get to that later. We can end this right now. You're going to let Julie Oliver, who's a failed Democratic congressional candidate,
what does that have to do with anything that she's
Bat, it's okay. I put my points of what she said, and I'll just respond later. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you.
And if we could keep this about the subject and not attack the various different sides.
Of course.
This is I'm just, and everybody on the phone, we don't need to say, use the language that you're using. Right. It's a problem. This is a big problem in our community that needs to be solved. Right. And let's not stoop down to calling people names. This is really ridiculous. Let's be adults on this.
Yeah, Julie should have never done that. Exactly.
Hey, the reality is there are paid political consultants behind this. That's reality.
The reality is you.
All right, let's move on to the next questions.
And I'm just a mom. I'm a mom. I am a mom that's been at it longer than Matt. Okay. And I have been meeting with community members, English and Spanish. I grew up in a low-income community and was being impacted by this. And I have a right to be here and speak on behalf of people who feel that their voice is not being heard. And that is me. I've been at this longer than Matt, and I do not appreciate you name calling this organization, because if anybody, I have been acting on this on a longer and a wider scale than Matt.
And that is correct. And I appreciate your passion on the issue. This is a problem that needs to be solved, and I don't think getting in the name calling is going to do it. And everybody has a right. They live here in Austin to have an opinion on it.
It's not a name calling to say that they're political consultants behind this. It's not name calling.
You are lying.
Julie, let us move on.
It's not. That's not name calling to say that there are political consultants behind this.
Can we move on, please? Go on.
Question for Mr. Molika. And then I'll have a follow-up too. But first, when the council voted 2 years ago to lift the camping ban, did it have a good plan for addressing homelessness?
Yeah, so I think clearly, if there was a plan in place that wasn't communicated to the community very well, I think that's clear. And that doesn't, however, absolve the issue around recriminalizing homelessness in this community. I think that what we have to do and what we're trying to focus on here is just to center the people that will be impacted by this proposition on the ballot in May. And I think we have to be really clear that, ECHO's here, we're a solution-focused organization. And we know that criminalizing homelessness in communities that have done that do that, people stay homeless for longer, and it's harder for them to access housing and services afterwards. And you can sit here and we can have conversations about what the city should have done, what ECHO should do, what service providers should do or haven't done, and all, a million other ways. If you want to talk about how the city should spend their money, I think all those things are points that we could have long discussions about. But the bottom line is there's not enough places right now for people to go. If Prop B is put in place and homelessness is recriminalized in this area, there's not enough places for people to be inside. People are forced to sleep outside right now. They don't have another option. This proposition doesn't direct city council to create sanctioned campsites. It doesn't direct city council to spend their money in a certain way. It doesn't direct ECHO to do anything associated with homelessness or the community to create a plan. And so that, I'm not here to deny that we need all those things. We certainly need more housing options for folks. We need permanent housing options. We need emergency housing options. We need beds to open up to provide spaces for people experiencing homelessness. But, right now, this Prop B doesn't do any of that. It just simply recriminalizes homelessness without solutions. And, there's no doubt we need solutions in this community, that's for sure. And I think we would love the help, to partner with Cleo and Matt on solutions to end homelessness for our most vulnerable Austinites. I think that's something we're really passionate about at ECHO. And that's a piece I think commonality that we have on this call is that we're looking for long-term solutions. I don't think Prop B does that. I just want to be clear too, and looking at the data that we have too, that Matt mentioned on earlier about our point in time count for last year. If you take our point in time count and then look at all of our housing inventory, there are still about, and we all know, Matt mentioned that the point in time count is an undercount. ECHO believes that obviously it's not a full representation of people experiencing homelessness in our community, but of our current resources, if you take all of our emergency shelter, all of our permanent housing, all of our transitional housing opportunities, and then scale it to the people that were experiencing unsheltered homelessness in our pit count, there's still 1,300 people that would not have a place to go. There's just that many, there's not enough resources for people in this community. And until we can bring about the resources, we can't criminalize people for getting their basic needs met. And that's the focus that ECHO has. We need to do all the things that Matt and Cleo mentioned. We cannot put the cart before the horse and recriminalize homelessness until we have those and put a camping ban in place, until we can offer everybody a safe and stable place to be.
Quick follow-up, and if you can do this in about 2 minutes, because I'm trying to give both sides equal time here, but you mentioned we can't keep looking back, we need to go forward. So 1 or 2 minutes, what would, in your mind, is the most important thing we can do to address the long term?
Yeah, well, right now there's an unprecedented amount of money coming into our community from the federal government through stimulus funds, through the American Rescue Act, through the CARES Act, and all that money that's come in. We need to put pressure on our city council, on our county representatives, on our state representatives to use that money for people experiencing homelessness, for emergency solutions, for crisis intervention, for long-term permanent housing. There is an unprecedented amount of money that can be used for people experiencing homelessness. We need to really advocate strongly with our council, with our city staff, with our county staff and county commissioners, and certainly on the state level, the state legislature, because there's a lot of money coming to the state too, to use that money for people experiencing homelessness to bring more beds online so that people aren't forced to make a choice about or having to sleep on the street. And we can make the camping ordinances obsolete. If we offer enough housing for folks, they will take it, and then there won't be a need for any ordinances.
Question for the proponents. The city council has put tens of millions of dollars toward homelessness since lifting the camping ban. a lot of that money for hotels, for housing. If you had the power to direct those millions of dollars, how would you spend them to address homelessness?
So the housing first strategy, if you look at places that have been successful with housing first, like Houston, one of the main reasons they have been successful is because they have a camping ban. This is about compliance, compelling people to seek services. Okay, you cannot do that if you're allowing, like Haven for Hope. The president of Haven for Hope was here at the Capitol, the most successful homeless provider in San Antonio, where there's a camping ban also. He testified in support of the camping ban. He indicated that having unregulated camping enables homeless. Homeless have said to him, why would I go to a shelter when food is brought to me and I can do whatever I want? And this is not anecdotal. The Statesman, all media has reported on this. Austin has become a magnet for a place where they think it's a free-for-all. Austin must take care of the homeless community. We have to do that. But to be a magnet where other cities that have failed with this open camping, we should not follow that strategy. Yes, we should have housing, but we also need to identify the different types of homeless that are in our community and what they need. And not all of them want to be in a shelter. Some of them want to be in a campground where they don't have to comply with drug treatment or mental health treatment. And you are defying logic. You're not being honest if you're saying they all want to be housed in that way, in that traditional way. Because media, I'm sure you guys have reported on this also, that if you ask them, there's some of them that are not ready for that change. That's why Haven for the Hope, they have a courtyard for people that are not ready to enter the actual shelter, but they're in a courtyard, so they're safe. Right now, in these encampments, we have homeless women being victimized daily by these sex traffickers, the crime rings, and this is not protecting them. It is inhumane and is not compassionate that the opposition wants to say that, hey, having these encampments that are unregulated is the thing we need to do for them. That is wrong. And that's one of the main reasons I got involved with this, because I have housed homeless and refugee families, and I know for them, this is not the safe thing for them. Matt, do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's just very rich to hear from our colleagues here that we can't look back. Don't worry, everything's fine. All we need is more money. Well, how about we stop and say, where did the $161 million go that's been spent the last 3 fiscal years, when the new housing that's been provided is nowhere near what is coming in terms of the new homeless moving here, the expansion of the campsites, and all the negative consequences that come from camping. It's clear that Matt Malika and Julie Oliver and a lot of these people are using Mark Littlefield's polling to say criminalizing homelessness as many times as possible. We don't criminalize homelessness. We criminalize camping. We ban camping. The camping ban was in effect for 23 years. There was no crisis in our city. Julie, I think, or maybe it was Matt, mentioned something like 18,000 citations. How do you get 18,000 citations when at the time we had 2,500 homeless people, according to the point-in-time study? You cannot, on one hand, say our homeless population is small and manageable and not growing, and on the other hand, pretend that they're being cited and thrown in jail left and right. The Austin Police Association has testified in front of the City Council that during the 23-year period where the camping ban was in effect, we were getting 93% compliance, voluntary compliance. So this idea that homeless people were being rounded up, cited, and thrown in jail left and right is simply a smear. It is a lie. And I think the other side knows it. Now, you asked, where should the money go? Number one, we'd like to know where the money went. And that's why Save Austin Now PAC called for a complete and independent audit of the $161 million that was spent. And now the $73 million being spent this year. Look, if you take 5,000 homeless people and you divide by $161 million, that's $13,000 per homeless person per year. If you just focused on housing, we could house that community for $13,000 a year. Now, Matt, I realize that's an oversimplification. I know there's good work being done by the city with some of that funding. I think I saw part of your presentation to the Lynn Meredith Zoom a couple weeks ago. I recognize that services are being provided, but it's just really rich to hear the other side say, let's not talk about the past. Let's not talk about the fact we had no plan. Let's not talk about that. The consequences of camping, like the physical waste, the human waste that's created from camping, was never prepared for. Let's not talk about effects on our parks, where we know camping in parks has been illegal through the entire time of the camping ordinance. Let's not talk about effects on our waterways. Let's not talk about effects on our intersections, major intersections in our city. You know, it's just, they've made a difficult problem worse. And now they're saying, let us keep making it worse and give us more money, even though we've been wholly ineffective at moving the ball down the field and trying to solve this difficult challenge. We're saying, no, we can do better than this.
One more thing is that this whole Supreme Court challenge, we wouldn't have this as an argument as much if it wasn't for the fact that we need the city to find safe campgrounds for them. When I met with the mayor 2 years ago, I begged for safe areas where they could shower, where service providers could find them and they're not strewn about all over the city, and where homeless women are unsafe. There are registered sex offenders in these tent communities, and all of this chaos causes this disruption, causes crimes to flourish. Instead, if we had locations all across the city where they were sanctioned, this whole Supreme Court challenge, that is a false argument, because we have places. The city is refusing this. And today, again, no one is going to answer this. And the mayor didn't answer this 2 years ago. And every single time I have been at the city council meeting till 2 a.m. with other Hispanic mothers who are from low-income communities, because all of us, we can drive on by, okay? We can say, oh, wow, this is a big eyesore. No. For these communities, there was a young girl, her name is Amelia, and she testified outside her window she could hear actual sexual assaults on a woman. This is a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old child. I have a 7-year-old boy, and my little boy, I'm not having conversations about what sex trafficking and all that is with my little boy. And it's not fair that these communities have to put up with this chaos right now because the city refuses to find appropriate campgrounds for them. In the meantime, while they have admitted it will take years to build, retrofit, make ADA compliant shelters or other appropriate mental health drug treatment facilities for people who want them. That it is wrong to subject certain communities to this. And that is why I got involved. I'm a liberal, longtime liberal. All of my friends, thousands of my friends here in Austin, I'm very active in the Democratic community. I've always been. I met Mayor Adler, I voted for him. We are upset. The city council and people like politician Julie Oliver, they are not listening, because when I finish this, I'm not running for politics. I'm still just going to be a mom. I'm still invested in my community. I'm a former probation officer, worked in social service my entire life. And the way the city is going, they are not admitting how wrong they have done this. And why do you think they're not admitting it? Because they want to be reelected, and because, to show that they have failed and this policy is not working will mean a slap in the face to them and that they are incompetent. Okay, so they're putting us all through this because of their weak leadership, and I believe it's gross malfeasance.
Okay, I want to give the other side a chance to respond, and if you have about 5 minutes, if you could, and then we'll open it up to questions from the other board members. Matthew or Julie, either one.
What are we responding to on? Can you
just what Matt and Cleo said? Any?
I mean, I'll just take 2 seconds, Julie, and I'm happy for you to jump in. I mean, my sole focus on this is to make sure that people experiencing homelessness in our community are centered in this discussion. If you talk to people experiencing homelessness, they don't like the situation they're in. They don't like experiencing unsheltered homelessness, but they also don't want to be criminalized and getting tickets because they have no other place to go. So we need to really center those folks in this discussion. That's the issue right now. We're not here talking about failed politicians and failed leadership at the city level. Like, that is not part of this discussion for us. And for me, this is a human issue. These are Austinites in our community. These are legacy Austinites that are experiencing homelessness in their city, the city that they grew up in, that they have family roots in. We know that to be true. And when we're talking about those folks, we have a lot of city policies across the board and a lot of state policies and a lot of community issues that have failed those folks. And we're not here to say that they haven't been failed on a lot of different levels, but we cannot compound that issue by criminalizing their mere existence in these spaces. And that's the piece that we have to keep front and center in this discussion. And it can't be about all the other things that have happened in the past or that might happen in the future, unless we're here to really force our government and our city council and our county government and our state government to invest in solutions to end homelessness. And that's the important part here. We have to center the people that'll be impacted, and we have to keep our focus on those people.
And I honestly think that the one thing that we probably all agree on this call is that enough has not been done to house the homeless and provide the wraparound services. Speaking as somebody who formerly served on the Board of Central Health, which is our local healthcare district that collects property taxes, we were reviewing a pilot program of the chronically homeless, and we knew we were given data that if you house the homeless and provide the wraparound support services that are necessary to keep people housed, you dramatically decrease the cost to the city services, including law enforcement and including emergency care. So I think we all know that we all want to do something in this space, but criminalizing homelessness is not the solution. Austin has skyrocketing property taxes. Our state has had decades of failure of investment in public health infrastructure, including mental health resources. And quite honestly, Austin is one of the most unaffordable cities, well, in our state, let alone our nation. That's driving, and it definitely is a root cause that is driving homelessness. And speaking personally, as somebody who experienced homelessness in my youth, I can't imagine how different my life would have been if I had been charged with sleeping on the streets. I can tell you, I probably would not have gone back to finish high school, probably would not have gone on to college, and probably would not have gone on to law school. Criminalizing homelessness is not the solution. Housing and support services are.
I just want to mention one more thing, Juan, while I can. I just want to say that one of the things that's been caused by the pandemic right now, and we know just a couple pieces to around the encampments, is we know through the previous administration CDC guidance that disrupting the campsites is a bad idea right now. We also know, as Matt mentioned, we need to get everybody vaccinated. We need to get people experiencing homelessness vaccinated. That'll be extremely difficult if we have, for the encampments and people are getting disrupted and moved around and ticketed. And those are two things that are vitally important as we try to get through this pandemic, as we try to get people vaccinated, and as we try to move, to the other side of getting sort of back to normal, quote unquote. And the last thing I'll say is just, we know that the economic toll that the pandemic's had on Austin, and the biggest impact are people that are at or below the 30% of median income that have lost. 50% of those people have lost their employment in 2020. And as compared to people who make $60,000 or above, only 1% of those folks, 1% of that population has lost their job. We have a pending crisis on our hands too that is, in Austin here. If not rectified, we could have serious issues of increased homelessness in our community. And so we need to make sure that whatever policies and whatever we're looking at moving forward is addressing the needs of Austinites, and that we're not criminalizing the mere act of existing in public spaces.
Okay. Other questions from other board members?
Yeah, I have a question. And I've been close to this issue for several years, and first I want to say, it's a shame that this has all been politicized, and I know the criminalization term keeps getting thrown around, but the reality is on the ground from reading the information, quite frankly, Mac was right when we were talking with the city police. Those numbers that you guys quote were for several years ago, and then the last couple of years going up to 2019, they actually wrote very few citations, and voluntary compliance was the way. And so while it was technically criminalized, practically it wasn't being enforced, but it worked. And also, so in two years ago, when all this issue came up and it was reversed, there were a lot of people that wanted to come to the table to solve this problem, including the chamber, lots of groups that wanted to plan and urged, and we urged as an editorial board, do not reverse the camping ban without a plan. We were told by the mayor in an editorial meeting here at the Statesman, it will be fine, it'll all work out. And we said, what if it doesn't? What if there's people camping all over the city, in the parks, everywhere? And he said, well, if that happens, then that will force the community to do something. Why is it, I guess I'll ask Julie and Matthew, why is it that, why can't the reverse be true as well? Why can't this, I'll say in 2 years, obviously the city hasn't really done much to solve the problem. The problem has gotten worse, and it is worse than it was before. Walking around. So why isn't the opposite true? Let's reinstall the ban and let's force the city to solve the problem. I guess, why wouldn't that opposite argument be true?
I mean, I think your assumption is that the cities, what you're saying is essentially that their people aren't working to solve the problem of people experiencing homelessness, and that everyone is satisfied with people camping in public spaces as the answer. And I will say, just for me, like from Echo's position, and you're right, we're not, Echo is not politically driven in this. We're just trying to end homelessness in our community. And I think the clear message that's gotten through after the ordinance changes is that homelessness is more visible. Therefore, that's a problem for the community. And I guess what I would say is that's always been a problem. Homelessness has always been a problem in this community. It's not something that is new to the ordinance change, and it's been a problem in every community. And communities that have camping bans in place, no sit-by ordinances in place, have populations of people experiencing homelessness as well. And it's not something that's going to recriminalizing or reinstituting the camping ban is not going to change the number of people that are experiencing homelessness here in Austin, Travis County. It's just not going to do that. It's going to push them out of the downtown core and into areas that are less sort of, from an infrastructure perspective, able to handle folks, and to allow for them to get services, and allow for them to get trash pickups and other things to happen, whether you think enough of it's happening or not. But I can tell you, if folks are being pushed from out of downtown into West Austin, into East Austin, into North Austin, and into South Austin, they're going to be in those communities. That's where they have no place to go. We don't have any open beds. We don't have any non-used permanent housing beds. They're just not there. So the solution can't be to hide folks. It has to be to house them. That has to be the solution we're focused on. It can't be just to reinstitute a camping ban and think that they're all going to disappear. That's just not gonna happen. Last thing I'll say just quickly is, I wasn't here when the ordinances, when the vote was taken in 2019. I showed up 2 weeks after that vote was taken in 2019 to work at Echo, and I'll say I don't know all the lead up to that and how all those things came together. But what I will say is, not having a camping ban in place is the right thing to do for a community. It's the right thing to do for people experiencing homelessness in that community. There probably should have been an accompanying investment in that scenario, but it's not right to be citing people, to even move them along, even for voluntary compliance, to have them keep picking up and moving and moving and moving. It's not the right thing to do. It's not a solution to end homelessness. So that's just a fact. Those are the facts.
So,
can I respond?
Could we? No, I get an opportunity, and I would ask Matt Makowiak to mute his phone, please. Well, this question was posed to Matt Malika and me. So I'd like to answer it. And, prior to, decriminalizing homelessness in 2019, our homeless population was just hidden. And they got pushed to the periphery where their places are inaccessible. I will tell you that a firsthand account of former city council member and now Travis County Attorney Delia Garza, when she was a firefighter, she would be called to the areas where the homeless camps were set up. And she said that is actually an incredibly unsafe environment for first responders. If we had a homeless problem, we have always had a homeless problem in Austin. And just because it was hidden, because we had a so-called camping ban, and really it was a way to criminalize homelessness and being poor, didn't mean that we didn't have a homeless problem. We did. And decriminalizing homelessness allowed us to see how pervasive that problem is. We did not prioritize as a city and as a community housing for folks experiencing homelessness. And I can tell you, I moved to Austin in 1995. I think the Arch was built shortly thereafter. Very little was done in those 20 years, 25 years about homelessness and providing more housing opportunities for them. We certainly don't have a supply now that could actually house our homeless population. And that is what we are working towards. We need to be providing housing solutions and wraparound services for folks. I've always said, I don't understand why the city doesn't buy the old Sears store. Talk about a perfect location to house the homeless. It's right between a grocery store and a healthcare clinic. And it's in a part of town where they can get transportation. So if we really want to talk about solutions, let's talk about solutions. But criminalizing homelessness and being poor is not part of the solution.
So let's talk about actual solutions that have actually worked for cities that have been successful in this in our state, like Houston, the ones that Echo has even mentioned themselves. They have a camping ban, okay? That is because they know that they have to help people be compelled to seek services. And let's not follow, I'm urging the Austin American-Statesman reader, please, look into the cities where the open camping has been on for a longer stretch of time. They have failed, and they have put in not just millions, almost $1 billion into this, and they're still have made no strides in this. Okay, and not only that, but you're using the message from here that I hear is not that now we see the homeless. No, that's not true. You use them as pawns, and not only that, the average Austin person out here sees them in a negative view. They see them as the people who are, defecating. I can go on and on with all the horrific stories. We all know them. We probably have experienced them themselves. It depends on your level of acceptance and whether you think certain communities should be impacted by them more. But what I would like to say is that we need to have this camping ban reinstated, because we all know homelessness is not a crime. There's this criminalization, this little gimmick word doesn't work with the normal Austin resident, because what we know is that the majority of the people under the tents, they do want services. Some of them want different varying degrees, and this is just you're not being honest, and you're being intellectually dishonest. And the average person sees this and says, hey, we want people to be in various types of services. Some of them are ready to go in drug treatment. Some of them got homeless because they were a paycheck away from something, and something happened and now they're homeless. These people will seek services, but you can't expect people that are using drugs or other types of things. As a probation officer, I've worked with people and compelling people to seek treatment. I don't understand the faces you're making, Julia. You're so unprofessional. I don't understand this at all. So anyways, back to what I was saying. We want to have what we had before, which was 98% compliance, according to the Austin Police. I'm sorry, I got distracted because of Julia's unprofessional. I don't understand this debate. I've never had one like this before. Matt, can you take it over?
Yeah, I'll just make a couple quick points. I'm sorry, there is background noise here. I'm just because of where I am. I think the first point that has to be put on the table is the question of that I think that Matt and Julie cannot answer, and that is, has a camping ordinance ever worked in any other city where it's been tried? Los Angeles has 100,000 homeless people in Los Angeles County. They didn't have one before the camping ordinance was put into effect. So this concept that Matt has, that no one's coming here because of the camping ordinance, is absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous and laughable, and it's hard to even sit here with a straight face and listen to it. If you look at the camping ordinance in Portland, Seattle, Honolulu, San Francisco, all of those cities are so much worse off today than they've ever been because of the massive influx of homeless individuals who are coming to those cities because of their lenient policies. And it's making a difficult and intractable and expensive challenge of keeping homeless people safe and sheltered even more difficult. And that's the, again, goes back to the piece that I think we're trying to raise here. We do want to be about solutions. I meant to say this earlier, Matt, we would love to partner with you on starting on May 2nd to find real solutions to the homeless challenge. But we believe that cannot happen while a camping ordinance is in effect. And that's what the point that Cleo has made so effectively about Houston. I want to make one other point, and that is the Greater Austin Crime Commission, the Austin Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Austin Alliance, I believe a number of other organizations, but certainly the Austin Police Chief and the UT Police Chief all went to the mayor ahead of the vote in June of 2019 and said, "Don't do this. Slow down. Think it through. There are going to be unintended consequences. You're not prepared."
You don't have a homeless strategy officer.
Didn't have a homeless strategy officer. He hadn't even visited Los Angeles until after they voted for it. It's a ready, fire, aim strategy. They had no plan. Statesman asked that question. Matt said he didn't want to look backwards. He doesn't want to look backwards because the more he looks backwards, the worse it looks. It's ridiculous. It's embarrassing. It is incompetence. And it's failed our city. Every major intersection is worse. Every city park is worse. Public safety has never been worse. We're at, what is it, 48 or 49 homicides today? And that's because of the combination of the unconscionable 1/3 police budget cut combined with the massive influx of these encampments, which are fundamentally unsafe and unsecure. So every aspect of life in Austin is worse today, right? Tourism, the downtown corridor, which has been the economic driver and engine for Austin, is at risk right now. Ask anyone involved in a hotel, ask anyone that lives downtown, ask any small business owner, ask the owners of Royal Blue Grocery. Julie, you probably agree with them on every issue or almost every issue. They think the camping ordinance has been a total disaster for their business and for their employees. Ask the owners of Vinchung Steakhouse. Ask the Hispanic woman that owns Joe's Bakery on East 7th Street, which serves 99% Hispanic people who speak Spanish only. I go there for breakfast once a week. That place has been closed for a year because of the camping ordinance. The list goes on and on and on and on. So the question I would ask the statesman to really consider asking our colleagues here is, where has a camping ordinance ever succeeded? Because I mentioned 5 cities where it has manifestly failed, and you have to add Austin as the 6th place where it has manifestly failed.
And I would just say, just quickly, I want to make sure we mention in this too that, name a major city across the country that hasn't seen an increase in unsheltered homelessness. I mean, the homelessness is up. HUD just released their point in time numbers nationally. 500,000 people experiencing homelessness in 2020 than in 2019. For the first time ever, unsheltered homelessness was higher than sheltered homelessness in our country. There are so many factors built into this that are not Austin specific, that these are systemic failures of our country and of our systems, our criminal justice system, our healthcare system, big problems around affordable housing, not having enough affordable housing. Austin is short 55,000 affordable housing units in our community. You got to look bigger than just these ordinances. That it's a fallacy to think that would be the issue, that we've seen more unsheltered homelessness in our community, because communities across the country with very strict no sit lie ordinances, like Denver, Colorado, big influxes in homelessness. Denver, Colorado has a camping ban in place. They've been moving people, spending millions of dollars to move people from different places and break up encampments. They saw the largest increase in unsheltered homelessness of any community in the point in time counts last year. It's just not true that the ordinances have anything to do with our unsheltered population. It's just not true. Last thing I'll say, the only thing I have is the data to go on. The reports that we have are all public facing here at ECHO. They're on our website, posted for everybody to see. We know from the last point in time count we did in 2020 that about 80% of the people experiencing homelessness in our community are from Austin or Texas. We know that to be true. We know that there's not people just coming in droves from out of town. There's people that come to Austin because Austin's a great city. They think they can work here. They think they can afford a place. They want to be able to afford a place, and they can't. And that's just the truth. But to connect an ordinance change, a local ordinance change to an increase in unsheltered homelessness as the pervasive factor is just false. And there's so many things wrong with it. I mean, there are so many other factors that are contributing to our unsheltered homeless population across the country. And then here locally, we need to pay attention to those, because if we don't, it's going to continue to increase. And I'm not here to talk about politics or anything else. I'm here to center the people we're working for and working on behalf of. And if anyone thinks that we reinstitute a camping ban here is going to decrease the number of people, or over time keep people from coming to Austin that want to try to make a life here, you're sadly mistaken. And we'll be back here again next year talking about some new political way that we're going to address homelessness in Austin here. And it's just, quite frankly, it's never going to be a political issue. This is a societal issue and a structural issue that, if not accounted for, it's only going to get worse.
And I would like to follow up on Matt Malika's comments. We need to be listening to the experts, of which Matt Malika is. I'm not an expert. I just have lived experience as a homeless person. I can speak from that perspective. Matt Makowiak is not an expert. Cleo is not an expert. Matt Malika is an expert. This is what he does. He does it in a nonpartisan fashion, completely unpolitical fashion. He has the empirical data that supports this side of things. And in fact, if we rewind this video to the very beginning, when Matt Makowiak first spoke, he said, I do not have empirical data on how our unhoused population has grown. But I want to also point something out. Matt Malika said that 80% of our unhoused neighbors here in Austin either lived here in Austin initially or lived in Texas initially. 80%. So this is not some sort of rampant, people are busing. It sounds almost like the old adage of, caravans of immigrants. Nobody's sending caravans of homeless populations to Austin. Transportation in the city is already hard enough. Transporting somebody between cities is even a bigger challenge. So that's just silly to think that folks are moving here because we don't have an ordinance that criminalizes homelessness. That is just absolutely silly. The reality is, folks like Matt Makowiak and Cleo don't want to see homeless people. That's it. They don't want to see it. We need to be working on solutions including housing and wraparound services. Criminalizing homelessness, again, is not the solution.
So not only have I seen homeless, they've been housed in this home here, okay, and refugee families for extended periods of time. And something that I agree with Julie on is, please do listen to cities that are working, that this has worked, like Houston and San Antonio, that have a camping ban, because it is compelling people to seek shelter, to seek services. And those who aren't ready, what have I begged for from the very beginning when I met with the mayor before Matt and Julie got involved with this, and everyone else on this call? I begged for safe, sanctioned areas, because it was horrific to hear the stories that these low-income working class communities having to deal with. Okay, for me, that is the most important thing. And that at the end of this, I will continue to fight and make sure that all communities, regardless of income levels, have access to their parks. Because I have a backyard, but a lot of these communities are in apartments, and in the pandemic, they aren't able to access the parks. They're not safe. The playgrounds in schools, they're stepping in drug needles. And you can say, oh, it's an enforcement issue. No, it's after the fact. The police, the kids are already traumatized by someone having sex or defecating or shooting up drugs in front of them. It's already after the fact. It's not right that these communities are being impacted. Mine and Julie's communities are not being impacted, but I am speaking for them. And it's not about out of sight. It's about regulating camp areas for them. I've urged every Austin reader, please, after this call and after we are gone away from this, I urge you to ask the city council, please, because I've begged this. Find safe locations for them. Find safe, regulated locations like the state has done for people who are not ready to be compliant with mental health drug treatment. We all agree that we have a homeless epidemic in this community. A lot of them will want to go to shelter, or waiting for the shelters to be built or to be retrofitted. But in that time, which will take years, please find campgrounds where they can have water access in 110-degree heat. When they voted on this in June 2019, we urge them, please find safe areas. Since you didn't hire a homeless strategy officer like we begged you guys to do first, have a plan like everyone else that has more experience than Julie and I have. Have a plan. Find places where they have access to water like the state has done. I've never voted for a Republican, but our governor has done this. Okay, please, we can do this better than the state has done. We have the ability, we have the intellectual capital to do this. Please, I'm urging every reader, please, even outside of this proposition, please ask the city to find sanctioned campgrounds for them and have the community buy-in. How do you do that? By me having community meetings and saying, hey, we're thinking of this location for this shelter, and everything they're doing, the city is doing, is after effect. After they've already made the decision, even though you want them to have that community engagement, you want to have community support, you want to have community members be volunteers in these campgrounds or in these shelters or anything else. We don't want to have this negative view where you feel like you're under siege. Okay, so that's what I would say. Thank you.
I think that's a good place to end it there, Juan.
Yeah, that would be the last word because we're out of time.
Thank
you
guys.
for participating, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you
for your time.